Hello, welcome to Optimized for Humans. My name is Usha. I'm your host, and I'm an executive coach and consultant, really exploring this topic around AI adoption and what AI means for us in the workplace, and what does it mean to build something that is optimized for humans at the end of the day. I'm really excited to be speaking with Vanessa Shaw today. Vanessa and I met many, many years ago now at an unconference of some sort, I believe. And we've stayed in touch over the years and have had a very fortuitous reconnecting recently. And I've had the great privilege of being coached by Vanessa and being a part of a mastermind coaching circle that she has curated for some awesome women in this space. So, Vanessa, I'm so excited to have you on, and I'm so excited to kind of share some of your wisdom and have this conversation and bring your voice into this mix. I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself, your background, and what excites you about this topic.
Yeah, well, thank you, Usha. Yeah, so in my work coaching executives, in-house leaders, and early stage founders, of course, this topic of, okay, what does the future look like in the context of AI, and how do I meet the moment? And I think also for myself, just personally, I've had my own reckoning with, okay, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my profession? And so, yeah, I really excited to have a conversation today with you just about how do we face this uncertainty and change, and what does it look like from a really human, relatable way of, uh, yeah, this is big stuff. Like, let's just be honest. And I think we're all feeling it. And in some ways, trying to find clarity and focus and purpose and vision when things are moving, not just rapidly, but in very zigzagged and sometimes overwhelming ways. So I hope today I can just bring some of my own experience and what I'm seeing with my clients. And yeah, it's just really good to continue being in conversation with you, Usha. You always bring a lot of wisdom and insight.
Thanks, Vanessa. I love that as a start. I'd love to have our starting point be around that piece of just we're all in this together. We're all trying to make sense of this moment. And while I think we've had big disruptive moments before and moments of big change, and many, in our own lifetimes that we can remember, the pace of this one feels very unique and different and disruptive.
Mm.
And I think there's lots of narratives around it that are pointing to utopia and all this possibility, or dystopia and all this possibility for destruction.
Mhm.
And I'm curious how you're thinking about this and what's your sense about these narratives.
Yeah. Well, I love that you brought that up because it's true. I think it's like, oh, it's going to be wonderful. We're going to cure cancer, and
Right.
there's going to be all these wonderful things that come, or it's going to be terrible and nuclear war and so on and so forth. And it's a little overwhelming to bounce between those two dichotomies. And really, also just from a human level, I also see this kind of battle amongst folks. Well, you're either a resistor or an enthusiast. And so I just want to name how black and white thinking that is. And there's so much more in the middle, in the gray zone, or so much more color, a whole kaleidoscope of ways we can be just showing up. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think about a couple things, and from speaking with others in the space, and some clients and colleagues that, CEOs and, people that are deep involved, they've used this idea of it's kind of like when the internet started. It's more, that's a better reference than some other disruptive moments. And that, yeah, the internet did make certain things really good and really awesome. I work from home. I work remotely. I mean, that wouldn't be possible otherwise, right? And then there's also some really horrible things that have become true because of the internet and everything in between. And so it's not going to be all or none. It's going to be a variety is kind of how I think of it. But what I spend most of my week thinking about and being in conversation around is that, like, well, who am I being in the moment? And okay, I feel moments of resistance. I'm speaking personally. I feel moments of being a skeptic or feeling avoidant or overwhelmed or frustrated. And then I also feel moments of enthusiasm and excitement and wanting to participate. But I also feel a lot of things in between that. And so I think where, I work with my clients and just with myself is like, well, how do I want to be in this moment? How do I want to meet this moment and be participating? And there's two questions that I think can help others and has helped me is, am I committed to being right about where things are going with AI? Like, am I looking to prove a point? Because that's a really, um, you know, narrow way of looking at things, right? If I want to prove that I'm right about something or that the
Mhm.
article by Matt Schumer, there's a lot of like commitment to being right about his perspective there. What the alternative is like, am I committed to or open to learning and being curious? And who I show up as when I look through the lens of curiosity and learning is a lot more useful and energized, um, than when I'm trying to be right, be
Mhm.
closed, because the resistors or the enthusiasts, we could say, are both trying to be right about that perspective. The dystopian or the utopian also trying to prove right, but how can we just bring curiosity and learning? Is
Mhm.
is the way that has helped me move out of those moments when I felt stuck.
Mhm. There's something interesting in like the resistor and enthusiast framing. I'm sitting with how like I wrestle with both of those inside of myself.
Hmm.
Of I have so much enthusiasm around what's possible and just what's become possible in my own life and how much more growth I've experienced and I felt like has been enabled in a very concentrated amount of time because of how I've kind of used some of this technology. And there's also a weariness that I hold and a fear that I hold, especially around like a lack of equity and on
Mm.
how people can access these tools. What are the impacts of these tools? Like the data centers are good examples of that. Like they're making real impact on the communities around them, and a destructive impact. And so there's so much nuance around the newness of this and how we're using it, and it is having both incredible impact in some places and destructive impact in other places. And I wrestle with both of those in me of, is it okay to be enthusiastic? Am I like turning a blind eye to something that I need to be mindful of?
Hmm.
And is it okay to be weary? Am I missing out on embracing the technology and like all of what's possible in my own fullest potential, in our fullest potential as a humanity? So there's something around also, I think, in this, um, there's a you shouldn't be that feels baked in, like you shouldn't be too enthusiastic because then you're missing something, or you shouldn't be too resistant and then you're like, it doesn't feel neutral in the same way
Hmm.
that other things do. Like it doesn't feel okay to sit in any space. So that's an interesting thing that I'm holding as I hear you speak. And then the other thing that I'm sitting with is like agency,
Hmm.
which we've talked about before. And you've had this frame of like, who are these narratives serving? Because they are shaping our culture right now. And part of that is, again, I'm really quoting you here, but part of that is it's disempowering us and stripping us of our agency in this moment because we're all holding our breath and assuming that someone somewhere is
Hmm.
holding the puppet strings.
Yeah. In my work with leaders, something that I've had to become a student of and been deeply curious about is power and power dynamics, right? And there's this concept of like power over energy, and then down power, and then there's power with, right? And so I feel like I've become more sensitive to when messages and narratives are very much like power over. And it comes from this, again, place of I'm right. Um, but the thing with that energy is it actually comes from a place of anxiety, right? That dominance. And so there's fear there too. Um, and so that's where I'm sensitive to not just listening to what's the above, the louder narrative and what's actually going on underneath. Because that's where we can really connect on a more human level and be able to meet each other. Like, hey, I see that dominant voice that's being used to dictate and tell me urgency, and you have 1 to 2 years and 85% of X jobs and total, job loss. And it doesn't sound like it's coming from a place of calm,
Mhm.
trust, curiosity. It's very much coming from scarcity.
Mhm.
It's coming from a place of not enough. And the thing with that I uh, is in every organization before AI even was on our narrative, on our radar. And so this has been something that humans have been wrestling with for forever. And so, unfortunately, that energy is contagious.
Mhm.
This, like, I'm right, there's not enough, the world is a threatening place, it's a dog eat dog world. Unfortunately, that is contagious. And so I just want to know that if you're getting caught up in that, it makes sense. It happens to all of us. But being aware of it also gives us the opportunity to choose to move away from it and work towards being more, having your own agency and power, because that also is contagious. And so I think, working one on one with leaders, like we talk about this, like who do you want to be, and what kind of narrative do you want to be guiding and leaning into? It's not about ignoring and, putting your head in the sand or being, Pollyanna about this. It's about being able to hold complexity. And I think what you shared, Usha, about your wrestling with yourself just is exactly the kind of conversations I think leaders are facing everywhere. And definitely my conversations of like, this is so complex. What I'm experiencing is so complex. What's happening in the world is so complex. And like, how do I show up in this complexity and navigate it and be useful? And that's where I really try and get to some like core principles and core questions that help guide me, guide my clients in that complexity.
Yeah. Along those lines of complexity, and I love that framing too around like some of what this narrative is doing is amplifying scarcity. And and I think we're trying to fit something that has infinite potential to it onto our existing paradigm that is more finite and there's some scarcity around it. And I do think that's part of what's like, it's almost like short circuiting us, like
Mm-hmm.
there's a different way to imagine our world and this fits in, but in our current imagination of the world, um, even just at a very basic level of what money means and things like that. I just think I think that's an interesting thing to just remember and frame for ourselves. And even in an organizational um, context, there's this huge question of, great, now there's this tool that does a bunch of the work that I probably don't want to do. It takes on like redundant, repetitive tasks. There's something now that I can actually work with to help clarify my thinking, to make better decisions, that connects us more if we do it right, or also disconnects us more in a particular way. And I think right now the focus has been so on the transactional elements of things. It's been on efficiency, it's been on optimization, and we're still, I think there's a risk of that transactional nature being amplified. And I'm curious how you're thinking about it and what advice you would have for leaders to actually experience the full potential of this in a way that it enhances your team's ability to connect, collaborate, and create, and doesn't bog you down?
Yeah. Well, one of the comments on LinkedIn I read many months ago, I just can't forget, was actually from Bob Gower, another organizational designer, and he wrote that the missing piece of all of this that we're not talking about a lot is that AI is is forcing us, not asking us really, to slow down, step back, and really ponder what it means to be human and what is uniquely something humans can do and be that machines can't, that AI won't ever be able to do. And that question is happening everywhere, but we're not naming it so directly as he did in this post. And I think it's so true, because we're all sitting here, we're like, well, if AI is going to do all these things that I've been having to do, then what's left for me? What makes me useful still? What makes my contribution meaningful and actually so valuable? Because AI never will be able to do those parts. I need to spend some
Mm-hmm.
time reflecting on that. And I don't necessarily know if I have an answer for you yet, but I'll give you an example. Really incredible, brilliant mind, product leader, and now CEO of an AI company, Tatiana Mahmood. She has a teenage daughter, and about a year or so ago had enrolled her daughter in a coding camp. It was maybe 2 summers back. She saw where AI was heading, and she thought, you know what? I don't think learning to code is the right investment. And she was thinking over what would be the skills that 10 years from now my kids would be glad to have. And you know what she enrolled her daughter in? It was sailing, a sailing camp. Okay? Because she thought, look, okay, yeah, we'll have all the tools and AI and the predictive models on wind and weather and tides, but you still won't be able to create the experience of a human body on a boat in that moment, being able to sense what's happening around them and also bring in that wisdom. And that's something I think we've been quite disconnected from, of that sensing body wisdom. And I thought it was just a brilliant example of how we need to be thinking differently than we've been, and it's not going to look like the paradigm we've been in. And paradigm shift is hard to capture before we're there. And I have one real example of that. I was in I used to live in Spain, and I was doing a lot of team consulting during the digital disruption era, for those that remember that phrase. Basically, it meant helping companies realize they need to have meetings on Skype, not all in person, which is funny to think about. This was 2012 timeframe about. And I went to Italy for a meeting with some clients, and as part of the dinner of they had a water sommelier. This is Italy. Like, you gotta love that there was a water sommelier. And Usha, let me just ask you a simple question. What does water taste like?
Couldn't describe it, but I know the differences in different places, especially.
Yeah, you've been someplace, you drink the tap and you're like, ooh, that's not good.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, and we buy, $5 bottles of Voss water that we think taste better. Okay, so Italians actually have names and words and pairings, meal
Wow.
pairings with water. And so you have sweet water and you have dry, you have salty water. And so at each course in the meal, they had us taste a water to go along with the course. And at the end of it, they talked about, look, before tonight's dinner, you didn't have the sensitization to understand the variety of ways water could be related to. But now you will never be able to taste water the old way. It is
Hmm.
forever changed for you. And it's not quite the same as paradigm shift, but it's an example of how once we experience something, now we see how it used to be, but we're just not there yet. So we just, got to stay open to what we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. That also makes me think about context. And I want to ask you a question. How many decisions do you think we make in a day?
Oh man, I think I've heard this recently. It's like
But if you had to
40.
guess,
Oh, if I had to guess,
yeah.
oh, thousands.
Yeah, so we make about 35,000 decisions just about food every single day.
And a few more about water now too.
Yes, and many more about water now too. I gotta up my water game. What are these wasp bottles? I didn't know they tasted better. Um, and part of that is a lot of those decisions are subconscious. And the reason I bring that up is as humans, we are constantly scanning our environment and taking in information and processing it in a way that never quite, there's so much of that context that's not actually in our prefrontal cortex or frontal lobe. It's not conscious. Like there are tons of decisions I am constantly making that I am not even aware of. And if you think about artificial intelligence, it's being fed for the most part in this moment on data that we are consciously able to transfer to it, right? And in an organizational context, like no one's sitting there going, well, you can't do that. That person is going to take that badly, right? So if we're just like, let's say we're making a decision, but in that context, that's not an okay decision, or that's not a decision that will get struck down, as it goes up the chain, etc. And that because you know the relational components of things, right? And so there's this piece around like there's so much we as humans bring to the table and how we process and experience and interact with our world that actually we're not even fully able to articulate. And that's I think a huge gap in the artificial intelligence's
Mm.
capacity, that may be started to bridge over time. Let's see, we'll have to find out. So that's one story that I wanted to share. The other story that I wanted to share is there's someone who works on security at Meta recently shared a story about using OpenClaw to go through her inbox, and when she had done it in a like kind of sandbox inbox, it seemed to work really fine. And then when she gave it her actual inbox, it started to go crazy and just delete all of her emails. And when she investigated what was going on, it turned out that the actual instruction that said don't delete anything without asking me permission, or something to that effect, that piece of instruction was lost because the AI can only hold so much context at any one time. And so once it maximizes its context window, it'll just summarize things, and in that a whole lot gets lost. And I share that to just say I think we play a really big role in staying in the loop with all of these things. And even when we start to hand things over, I think it's the interaction between us that gives us the best results and the most possibility. I don't think it's sophisticated enough at this moment to actually replicate what we're able to do,
Mhm.
and to really hold the degree of context that we are able to hold as humans. And so that it's an interesting thing, I think, for us to keep thinking about and holding, and to really figure out, how do we optimize for that? How do we optimize for the context you and I have that can't be necessarily communicated in a memo, right? Like
Mhm.
we all know this and we all experience this. So there's something about all of that that I wanted to name as well. Um, I'd love to kind of, as we close this conversation, I'd love to give a little bit of a glimpse of like, how are you and I kind of grappling with our own uncertainty, and what are we learning? Where are we learning from? And what advice would you have for leaders who are also experiencing urgency, fear, worry, excitement, and the kind of full spectrum of emotion at this moment?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you brought that in because, uh, how have I upskilled? What am I focusing on? How am I trying to engage? And when AI was really starting to pick up speed, I was actually out on maternity leave, and I really just wanted to put my head in the sand. I was like, I can't deal with this. This is so overwhelming. I'll deal with it when I'm back. And then I came back and I had this moment of just really scared and thinking, oh, I'm already behind. And I ended up joining a community group, a professional friend and peer from long time. His name's Danush, and he's still running and operating this community group where it's basically like a learning incubator for AI, and they have weekly calls and you tinker around and you talk about what you're doing. And he's just this incredible guide and host and big hearted and really bright. And so that was immense. And so I went from feeling just really really behind to feeling actually quite capable. And so I can't recommend that enough. That was so helpful. And so on that note, for folks that are feeling like they're already behind, you're not, right? But sticking with that thinking might end up, you might be behind. And so the thing I could offer is, think about a time when you were facing uncertainty or change, and but you actually, it worked out. Like you showed up, you met the moment. Each of us have a memory, whether it was in high school or college or previous time in our career, and and look back for that wisdom of like, I've done this before. I've met uncertainty before and been able to grow from it. And how can you reconnect with that way of being? That's what I would really offer folks. And then, just the most recent investment I've made is I've joined a large investment kind of place for more advanced coaching skills. And it's part of a group of other high-level executive and CEO coaches. It's the biggest investment in my own coaching career I've ever made. And that's directly because I saw how AI is definitely helping guide people with a lot of kind of more accessible challenges that maybe some earlier more beginner coaching can provide. And so they think that won't be as desirable, but for really advanced coaching and really challenging dynamics, that's where I really want to upskill and just continue to grow and level myself up so I can be the best version of my skills as I can. So those are a couple examples, but yeah, Usha, what have you been tinkering with? What's really helped you in the last couple of years?
Well, I just want to comment on the what do we use AI for versus humans on the coaching piece. I think I think the way we transform as humans truly, deeply, often happens with each other. Both when we annoy or irritate each other and when we support and love each other. Like I really believe this at the end of the day.
Oh,
And I don't mean love in like a
yeah, no, I
sappy
love it.
romantic way, but in a
Yeah.
deep kind of like I think it's presence that transforms. And I use AI quite a lot from a therapeutic lens. So I'm constantly kind of trying to like just have more perspective or help it connect dots and like give me a sense of the patterns, etc., that I might be playing out. And it actually gave me this feedback, which was, I think you have a tendency to want to understand things really well, but there's a difference between the map and the territory. So you can understand that you have this impulse or this desire that comes from this place, from, whatever might have happened that drove me there. But in order to change it, you actually have to like feel the feelings and meet certain parts of yourself that are struggling in certain ways. And the best way that I know to do that is with an actual therapist who I also work with. And
Mhm.
and like there's moments of like I think there are places that we can only go with each other. And I would love for us to start thinking about that and optimizing for that. And obviously this is a personal example that I'm sharing, but I also think that's true for work. Some of the best ideas and greatest collaborations have come from just humans coming together and tinkering and having conversations. And I think transformations happens with each other coming together. And that's what I want us to focus on and start outsourcing everything else as, as fast as possible.
Yeah. Oh, I just love
Yeah.
that so much. I couldn't agree more. You said it so beautifully, that it's with each other that we transform, that we grow. And you're right. Like the community group that I joined was with other people, live calls, not a recording, not a course. Or and this program I'm doing is all in person. And so, um, and it's also changing how I'm working too. Recently, I just hosted a leaders dinner in the Bay Area where 8 of us sat down and had conversation for several hours around what it means to meet this moment. I'm hosting another one in LA, and it's really just I want to convene. I want to host and really in more intimate settings actually, and where we can really get deeper together. And I think that is a beautiful side effect or additional ingredient that's coming to life in this moment. So I would just hope if there's an opportunity for anybody listening to go learn with others, go be around others who are also learning and getting curious. That's really the best thing that we can do right now.
I love that. Thank you, Vanessa. And where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, thank you, Usha. Momentouswork.com is my website, and Vanessa Shaw on LinkedIn. I look forward to connecting with folks.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your insight and wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Usha.